Good afternoon and welcome to the weekly webinar series with the Kentucky Small Business Development Center. Thank you for joining us today. If you're returning to our weekly webinar series, I really think we need to form a club or something like that because we get to interact with you guys every week. But if you're new, I just want to let you know that I'm Janet Flom with the Louisville Center, one of 10 centers throughout the Commonwealth, providing service to all 120 counties. And so again, if you're not familiar with the Small Business Development Centers, or SBDCs for short, just allow me a few moments to share what we do. So we provide assistance to entrepreneurs like yourself, regardless of what point you are in the life cycle of your business. So if you're just starting out, we can assist with market research, business plan development, help you find some startup capital. If you're an existing business, we can help you hire that first employee, or maybe you're looking to expand your operations. We can help you find capital for that. Or maybe you need help with cash flow, or at this point in time, maybe you want to pivot your business. We have staff that can help you with all those things. Our staff is a professional staff that has a wide array of knowledge and experience in various industries. It really allows us to provide a very customized service to meet your particular business needs. We do all this at no cost to you, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration. They co-sponsor our program, and then the University of Kentucky administers the program in partnership with regional universities, community colleges, as well as local economic development agencies. You'll see on the screen, we're part of a national network known as America's SBDC. And what that means is there's a small business development center to serve every county in the U.S. So if you want to learn more about us, you can visit our website at kybizhelp.com. There you'll find additional resources to help you start, fund, and grow your business. You'll also find all the social channels that we're on. So if you'll go there and connect to your favorite, you'll stay up to date on services, news, or events like these. You can request personal assistance by emailing us at info@kybizhelp.com, or you can call our hotline at 1-888-475-7232. A recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you later this afternoon. So if you have trouble with audio or you just need to step away, know that you'll have access to the entire recording today. Moderating today's event is my fellow staff from the Louisville Center, Dave Etkin, our Center Director, and Tony Sears, our Assistant Center Director. Again, good to see you guys on another Wednesday webinar.
Hey, Janet.
Hi, Janet.
Hi,
Dave.
Again, I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the Center Director here at the Louisville Small Business Development Center. And we're really happy to be here today. Thank you for joining us again for another Wednesday webinar. And I'm really excited about today's guest and hearing what she has to say. For a number of years, quite a number of years, I guess, Tony and I on Saturdays teach class at Bellarmine University. And so every Saturday morning, we would walk up to our classroom, which was room 221 in the Brown Activity Center. And we would walk past these 20-foot tall pictures of really important Bellarmine graduates. And one of them is Dr. Hope Zoeller, who we have with us. So that 20-foot picture, Dr. Hope has been a towering figure in my life for a number of years now. So I'm so happy to have you here with us today. And so Dr. Zoeller, she has an extensive background in training and leadership development. She's helped large companies like UPS develop their employees. She's also a professor at Spalding University, and she has a doctorate in leadership and education. She's authored several books. She's just a great resource for people. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs are struggling. Especially if you have teams, it's tough to be a leader. It's tough to know what to do when you've never had to face these type of crises before. So hopefully we're going to learn a lot of things today that help us become better leaders and deal with the teams that are struggling as much as we are. So with that, Dr. Zoeller, I'd like to turn over to you. Don't forget to turn your audio back on.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate that. And it's funny you bring up the Bellarmine thing. that has been up there for a really long time. And my husband has said that once they get rid of it, he's bringing it to our house. And I'm like, no. It's just when you see yourself that big, it's very interesting. So yeah.
It might make a good yard sign.
It totally would. I've been out before. People have stared at me and they're like, are you on a picture in Bellarmine? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I appreciate that shout out. And it is truly a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon on talking about a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I've, really, as Dave said, I've dedicated my life to helping leaders being better leaders. And if there's not a better time than that is now to definitely hone in on what we're really good at and what we can become better at. And, I keep saying this to everybody I'm coaching and training right now, that if we don't use this pandemic as an opportunity to, just really look at how we're showing up and look at how we're doing things and find ways that we can show up better for ourselves and our teams, we're going to really miss a window. Because I think all of us, we were just talking before the webinar started this afternoon, I think everybody's learned how to do something that they didn't know. And if you haven't, it's shame on you, because there has just been, again, so much opportunity to learn to do things. So what we're going to talk about today, and I say this a lot about what I do for a living and what I teach, is common sense that's not always common practice. I think you're going to hear a lot of things today that nothing's going to surprise you, like, oh, I've never heard that before. But what I hope it does is it makes you reflect for a minute and think about, how are you showing up for your team? Are you doing these things well? Do you have an opportunity to do them better? And I have provided for you a handout, because we're going to go through an acronym for CARE. And I'm going to just share some tips and things around these 4 things that I think you can do to really, again, show up and be a better leader for your team. So to get started with that, I want to share some statistics from Gallup. And this to me, and I see this I've been doing this for 20 years, and every year this statistic and all of this gets validated. But Gallup did a poll of more than 1 million employed U.S. workers and concluded that the number one reason people quit their jobs is a bad boss or immediate supervisor. 75% of those workers who voluntarily left did so because of their bosses and not the position itself. I say this all the time. People don't quit companies. They quit people. So when you don't think that you have a lot of influence as a leader, you absolutely have influence, because if somebody is going to leave or stay, it's really going to be dependent on how they feel that you care about them and show up for them, again, as their leader. And I say leaders are very, very contagious. And so as a leader, what are you spreading? Are you spreading, positive things? Are you helping develop people? Or are you sending people away? And, being in HR for a number of years when I was at UPS in my corporate career, if you looked at any of the exit interview data, the number one reason why people left was generally connected to a bad relationship that they had with their boss. So, as I said, as we go through and we talk about this afternoon about the things that you can do to show up, realize that all these things are going to be contributing to getting people to stay. And it's not the people always that you have to worry about that quit and leave. It's the ones that maybe quit and stay and that are checking out and no longer show up and no longer have anything to say. And, the moment that your vocal people start being quiet is a time that you really need to lean in and figure out what's going on. What might I be doing to contribute to this? Because, again, you have a lot of influence to make people want to be in their job and to excel and to do a really good job. So the acronym that we are going to talk about and goes along with the handout, and as I said, as I go through and I speak to each one of these, what I'm going to ask that you do is I want you to think about your own actions when you show up every day. Are you doing some of these things? Are you not doing some of these things? And if you're not, why not? Like, what is preventing you from doing this? Because as I said, you're modeling this, if you want to have a collaborative team, are you yourself being collaborative? And I did include, as a supplemental takeaway from this afternoon's conversation, I have given you a list of questions that I'm going to encourage you, after you go through this reflection, through this webinar, think about asking your team for feedback on this, because you might think that you are doing all of these things amazingly well, and you might find out maybe with a couple people, you're missing the mark, that some of the actions that you are doing are not necessarily supporting your intentions. So checking in with your team and asking for feedback is a great way to find out if our self-perception is in alignment with what our team thinks, because it's really good to be self-aware, but make sure that the self-awareness, again, is in alignment with what everybody else thinks. So on the second page of the handout, you'll see those questions if you find them helpful to have discussions with your team. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a collaborative communicator. And I have to share an interesting story on this one. I had a leader several years ago that I was working with, and this person really, really felt like they were a collaborative leader. So they asked me to come in and observe a team meeting that they were facilitating. And after about 20 minutes in, I realized that this was not a collaborative leader. It was more like somebody that was sitting down and having a monologue versus a dialogue with their group. There were really no questions asked of the team. It was pretty much, I'm telling you, this is the direction we're headed. I'm telling you. And then at the end, of course, it was like, well, what do you all think about that? And the conversation that I had after that was, once you put your ideas forward as a leader and you tell everybody what it's going to be, and then you ask for the feedback, for some, they may think that the decision's already been made. And, it's hard because as a leader, we want to have the answers. We want to be able to tell people things, and especially right now, all of the things that we're going through the pandemic. But it's always good if people feel like they have a say in what's going to happen, or at least that they can give some feedback, and you want to hear that. So I always will say that team meetings are a great place if you meet regularly with your people to figure out, am I having a monologue or is this a dialogue? And are people being allowed to speak? Do people feel free that it's okay if they disagree? But that space for me is always the best space to be able to get that feedback. So I wanted to share with you, so how do we do that? Because, I say, okay, be a collaborative leader. What does that mean? It really does mean being open to the ideas of other people. And I'm coaching a couple leaders right now that they are not really open to ideas other than their own. And they've been with the company a really long time and they've seen a lot of things. And I never negate that experience. But everybody brings something to the table. Everybody has something to share. And the people that want to stay and want to work for you and work for organizations are those people that feel like their ideas are being heard. It doesn't mean like every idea that they have is going to be implemented, but at least it means I feel free to be able to share that because I know that the person that I'm sharing this with is going to be able to listen. And I tell you what, if I had to give one piece of advice to leaders right now that are struggling with what do I do? Listen to your people, ask questions and listen to what they have to say. Because it's critically important right now because so many people are going through things that, we just can't imagine. And all of us are experiencing things very differently. But again, it's important to not always show up with the answers. It's more important to show up with questions and then to really, again, listen to what individuals have to say and try to understand it and be flexible in that and appreciate the diversity. If you had everybody that was like yourself working on your team, you would be in some serious trouble because if everybody's thinking alike, somebody's not thinking. And, I work with a lot of leaders that they're hiring somebody new and they'll tell me they're so excited because they've hired a mini version of themselves. And 6 months later, I'll check back in and I'll be, how's that going? And they're like, oh my gosh, it's a mini version of myself. So, while in the moment, it might be great if you feel like everybody's going to agree with you and everybody, if that's the case, you're really not in a collaborative space. You're just in a space of everybody nodding their head and going the direction. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. But we need a group of people with diverse thoughts, diverse feelings. And we need to make time for that because it's much easier to spend time in a monologue than a dialogue. But if you really want to have a successful team and you really want to grow people and grow your organization, and for many of you that are leading these, you're the CEOs, presidents, you have got to make time and space for collaboration. People have to feel that they can come to you and tell you things. And as I said, if nobody's coming to you telling you anything, that is when you should be most concerned because people are thinking something. They just need to be able to share it. So as a team, it's critically important that everybody has a clear goal in mind. And I think we all started with goals at the beginning of the year. And maybe for some of you, you started goal planning at the end of 2019 and then March it. And we've had to realign. And if you've done that, did you come together as a team and figure out how are you going to get through this? For some of you, we were talking before the call for my business. I had to figure out how to deliver coaching and training 100% via avenues like this, Webinar Jam, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. So, how did you bring everybody together and say, how are we going to look at this goal and maybe change it? Or how are we still going to be able to do what we need to do as a business? And that should never be on one person to figure out. It should be where each person has an opportunity to contribute to something. And, that's why I give each member part of the project. When people come into a meeting, what is their role? Why are they there? They should understand and they should know that. How are you going to communicate with your people? I hope for those of you that do have direct reports reporting to you, and then your direct reports may have direct reports that report to them. How, as an organization, as a team, do you communicate? Do you have regular team meetings? Do you have one-on-ones? And I am not a meeting for the sake of meeting person, but meetings become critical, but they also need to be effective and impactful, and everybody needs to play a role in that. And check in with the team. I had one group I was working with, and they decided that their team meetings were terrible. They had no agenda, no purpose, no outcome. And so, they reevaluated that, and they came up with a system of, an effective meeting. But the whole team came up with that together. Again, it wasn't the leaders saying this is how we're going to do it, because everybody, to be able to commit to it, everybody needs to be able to have a say in it. So next, with the collaboration, becomes the next really big piece as a leader, and that's having an accountable attitude. And that 100% starts and stops with you as a leader. How are you at holding yourself accountable? What are you modeling? And if you think right now, if I were to ask a number of people in your organization that work for you, what does accountability mean at your company? What would they say? And, I've gotten a lot of answers, but, for some it's this, and this is the company coat of arms, meaning it's everybody's fault except mine, and blaming another team, blaming another department, blaming another person is taking accountability. And that is not the true definition of accountability. Accountability means owning up to what we've done, accepting it, learning from it, and moving on. It's not about blaming. And, all of us have been watching the news right now, I'm sure. And I always listen for this when challenging times come up. How do leaders respond? What do leaders say? And if they accept that accountability and they say, you know what, we really screwed up. And, here in Kentucky, our governor a number of times has admitted that something has happened, and he owned it 100%. And nothing makes someone more respected or wanting to work for someone than someone that owns what has happened. And when you're a team, it doesn't matter if somebody on the team didn't do something, you are the leader of the group. So how do you accept that accountability? How do you turn around and help the entire team be able to learn from it? So I came across this, and this is from Mark Samuel and Sophie Sheesh. I believe that's how you say it, or Shish Chick. It's a great book. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. It's The Power of Personal Accountability. And something that I wanted to share with you from that book is the accountability model. And in the accountability, one of the accountability classes I teach, we spend quite a bit of time on this model. And if you'll notice, there's two loops. And so I call them Loopville. And it's when challenging times happen, where do you go as a leader? Do you go to the accountability loop, or do you go down to the victim loop? And, if you notice, what happens when people go down to the victim loop is they are ignoring, denying, blaming, rationalizing. And it's just not a great space to be in. And a lot of people, you will hear them, I don't know why this is happening to me. I have heard this a number of times about what we're going through right now. I just can't believe this pandemic is happening. Why is this happening to me? Why? And it's like, this isn't happening to you. You have a choice to how do you respond to this. This wasn't intentionally set for any of us. This is just what is happening. So how are you responding to that? How are you taking accountability for showing up better as a leader? Because if you'll notice on the right, we always have a choice. We always have a choice in how we respond. And people that are accountable go up to that accountability loop. They recognize, own, forgive, examine, learn, and they take action on it. To say that none of us will ever visit victim loopville that's just not real. All of us at one point or another, if you sit here and think about it, when challenging times have happened, have we gone to that victim place? We have. We absolutely have. But the difference is really great leaders don't stay there. They recognize it and they will move themselves out, and they will start holding themselves and their team accountable, because it's just a healthier way to live. It helps us move forward, not stay stuck. And people that are living in victim loopville are always going to be stuck, because they're always going to be at the mercy of someone else's decisions, actions. And if it doesn't work out, it's always going to be that other person's fault. And as a leader, I just, I want to caution you, because for some of us as leaders, we want to help our people and we want to tell our people what to do. Again, especially going through this time that we're going through right now, really nobody has gone through something exactly like this. But we have to be careful when we give people all the answers as leaders, because there's not much accountability that people take generally if someone else is always telling them what to do. And it's that whole adage of, are you teaching your team to be able to fish? Are you teaching them to fish for themselves and to look for the answers? Because if you always give them the answers, they're always going to come to you for the answers. And then when it doesn't go well, they can become that, that blame game. And one of the best leaders that I ever worked for at UPS, whenever you would walk in with a problem, he would always ask you, what is one idea that you have to fix it? And you just got to learn that about him, that you never walked in with a complaint about something that you didn't have one idea to be able to fix it and make it better. And if you didn't have that in that moment, if it were not a crisis or something was, in the middle of blowing up, then he would say to you, well, why don't you think about it? We'll schedule a meeting tomorrow, come back in and let's talk about your ideas to make this better. Because obviously you've identified it. So, are you creating a team of problem solvers or problem admirers? And if we're frustrated because you feel like sometimes you have a team of problem admirers, I ask you to take a reflection of yourself. What are you promoting? And, generally it's because we've gotten so used to helping solve problems because we want to help our people. But doing everything for them isn't really helping them. We need to help them grow and develop. So a little technique that I just want to share with you along the lines of accountability, and this has been around for quite a while, but I will tell you it is brilliant. I wish I would have had this as a younger person, but it's called the question behind the question. So it's called the QBQ, and it starts with the word what or how, always contains an I, and focuses on action. So I'm going to give you an example of something that we might say to ourselves, and when we do, how can we reframe this into a more accountable space? So if you've ever found yourself saying, why don't my people just do their job? Why don't my people just do their job? Do you see there's no acceptance of any accountability on your part as a leader when you say that? So thinking of this in a question behind the question format is, what can I do to better communicate my expectations to my team? So what can I do to better communicate expectations to my team? Because when we ask it the first way, we're really in that victim loop. Because if I'm just sitting around frustrated because I have a team of people that aren't showing up in the way that I need them to show up, that's not 100% on them. It's, what have I been communicating? How have I been communicating? And I will tell you, this self-work and this self-reflection is some of the hardest work you're ever going to do, because you really do have to look at, if you're frustrated with how some things are with your teams, what is it that I'm promoting? What is it that I'm modeling? What is it that I'm spreading? And if you don't like some of those things, think about how can you start showing up differently. So just a couple last things. And, I think it's really important, as I said, going back to my question, if I were to ask people that work for you, what does it mean to be accountable in this organization? To really have a true culture of accountability, this has to happen at every level of leadership, with you being the entrepreneurs, with you being the top person modeling this, cascading it down. But you have to make sure that across the organization, everybody has a clear set of expectations. Does everyone that works in your company know what it means to be successful? Do they know how to achieve success? Do they know how to make things work? That's first and foremost, number one, because if I don't clearly know what's expected of me, how am I ever going to get there? How am I ever going to be successful? And then inspect what you expect and give feedback on it. So setting clear expectations with people, checking in on how they're doing, and then providing that feedback is critical. And if you don't have this, without it, people are not going to be successful. And as I said, it's not always individuals' fault if we haven't said what we needed. And, often we think we've communicated something, we think we've said something. And I work with a number of leaders that feel like if they've emailed it, it's been clear. It should be out there. And, I will tell you that email and instant messaging, or, whatever type of communication vehicle you use like that in your company, that was never meant to be the main mode of communication. It was meant to be a supplemental thing. And if you've got expectations to set with individuals, you should be sitting down with them regularly and having those conversations and checking in. Then following up maybe with an email on, as a follow-up to our conversation, this is what it is. But it just, for a lot of us, it gets easier just to put it in an email, and then we feel like we have, the accountability piece covered. But if you truly want to create that accountability culture that I'm talking about here, it's, do you regularly meet with your team? Do they know what's expected? And now more than ever, if any of you have had teams that have had to go remote, how are you, checking in on them? How are you following up? And I don't say checking up, but checking in. How are you making sure they're having the resources that they need? They still know what the plan is, because the plans are constantly ebb and flowing right now in the world. And so just making sure people always know is setting them up for success. All right. The next part of being a caring leader is being respectful. And this is another one that means some different things to different people. But I will tell you that the biggest thing that you can do to be respectful with people, or one of the biggest things that you can do to be respectful to people, is listen to them, especially right now, because so many people have so many things going on. And to truly be able to attempt to understand what people are going through, it requires listening. It requires respectfully listening. And I don't want to mistake the listening piece where I have to agree with whatever it is the person is saying. It doesn't. But how am I ever going to truly be able to understand where someone is coming from and be able to support them and hold them accountable if I don't understand the space where they are? And so, part of being a caring leader is being respectful, responding respectfully, and just saying, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't know you felt that way, or I didn't realize that was a challenge for you. Because, often we get, as we move up to higher levels of leadership, we can tend to forget where we've come from. And, that was when I know when I got promoted at UPS, that was one of the first pieces of advice that someone gave me, is never, ever forget where you've come from, so that, you can understand and you can respond to people and you can support people. So that is a tremendous ability to be able to do that, to connect with your team and be respectful. And so the three things that everybody needs is just, we need to be acknowledged. We need affirmation. And again, that's not agreement, but it's affirmation that I'm on this team, that I'm willing to be part of a collaborative conversation, even if what I'm saying you don't necessarily agree with. You're going to hold me accountable to that. You're going to give me feedback. You're going to let me know how I'm doing, and you're going to help me grow and succeed. Because without accountability, people won't grow. I mean, none of us got great at doing what we're doing without someone giving us feedback and holding us accountable along the way. And then it's the respect. So every employee, every person that works for you needs these three things: acknowledgement, affirmation, and respect. So think about that for yourself for a moment. How are you doing that with your team? How are you showing them that you acknowledge them, you hear them, and you respect them? Do you, if I were to go again and kind of just survey your group, what would they say about that? It's like, yes, every time my leader asks a question, he or she listens, and I feel heard. And it doesn't always mean that you agree, but it doesn't, if you're always listening and you're always asking those questions, it's okay if you don't always agree. But it's when we're not, again, that we have challenges, that we're either going to lose people or we're going to have people that quit and stay, which to me it's a much more dangerous space, because they're going to be the problem in my ears, and they're not going to tell you what's going on. And we need people showing up and being able to share things with us. But it starts by us creating that environment for them to be able to do that. So I love this. So before you speak, whatever it is that you're going to say and giving feedback, ask yourself, is this true? And how do I know it's true? Have I gone and have I checked in with a few other people? Have I gotten some more data? Or am I just right now emotionally upset about this and I'm going to respond to it? And, for some of us, when things happen, because it has been a very stressful 3 months, and I'm already bracing for a stressful rest of 2020. I think things are still coming. But, how do we calm down the emotions and take a second to think through something before we go and we address it with somebody? How do we know this? Are we just, again, basing it on something we think, we feel, or do we have some facts that we can back it up to? Is this going to be helpful? And when I'm teaching leaders how to give their teams feedback, I'm always asking them, what is your intention? Is it to help or to hurt? And if it's to hurt, just because you're upset because somebody did something, maybe now's not the time to share. Maybe it's something that never gets shared. Because anytime that we are sharing with someone, it should be something that's going to help them grow and make them better. And that truly is the definition of feedback, is what can I give someone that's going to help them grow and make them better? Is it inspiring? Is it going to inspire them to do better, to show up better, to be better? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And, if we just run this little drill through our head before, we open our mouth and we speak, and not only just to our teams, but to the people around us, I think we would all, better serve the community, the country, the world, because you don't necessarily have to put everything you think out there. And I don't mean that we shouldn't be able to share, but why is it you're sharing it? Are you doing it to help make these things better for other people? So just some tips for respectful interaction in the workplace. Show curiosity for the views of others. I always challenge people that tell me that they're having issues with someone, or they can't stand somebody, or they just, wish they could pay them to stay home because the team would be more productive if they did, because this person is such a challenging individual. I always say, and I'm going to shamelessly have stolen this from a colleague of mine, but it's, how are you being curious and not critical for that person? Always try to find out something that you didn't know about those people that really challenge you, those employees that get you really frustrated. How can you be curious about maybe how they perceive things? Do you just feel like It goes back to that, is this true? How do I know it is? Have I ever checked in with this person? Have I ever asked this person? So really showing curiosity for the views of others makes you someone people want to work for, because it shows you respect me. Even though we're different, you want to hear things that I'm doing. You want to understand things that I'm doing. And I want to share that with you. And then seeking ways to grow and stretch and change for yourself. The moment that we stop growing, we really have stopped truly living. Because I don't know anybody today, or even just think back from March, that could say, I don't want to learn how to do virtual anything. I'm not a virtual player. And I've still got people, that will show up for different things, and they're still getting comfortable with the video, and that's absolutely okay. But just think about the last 3 months. If people have been unwilling to change, it may force some people out of business. Everybody's had to learn how to do something a little bit differently. And then how are you connecting with people and supporting them in their efforts? You should know, at least for every person that works with you, what are their goals? What are their things that they want to learn? And how do you as a leader support and connect to that and help them develop? Also, number 4, allow yourself to be wrong on occasion. And the biggest thing I will tell you that I see with leaders, the biggest thing that gets in the way, that limits them truly from being successful, is the ego. Because they will not admit when they've made a mistake. And they will either blame somebody because somebody didn't do something. And, to me, to work for a leader that has the ability to say, I screwed up, I did this wrong, and hold them accountable and go to that accountability loop that we talked about, that is very powerful to work for somebody like that is willing to admit it, is willing to own it, and is willing to learn and move on from it. So, we are not all always right, and sometimes, and I'm sure all of us can relate to that, when we just thought, you know what, I know I'm wrong, but I'm not going to admit it. And for a minute, we feel good about it. It's never a long-term feel good, though. It's owning. And just even, again, what we're going through, there's probably things you've done really well through this. And if you ever, hopefully none of us have to go through this ever again, but if we did, we would know how to show up and be better, because we would admit things that we didn't know. That's part of being in a respectful workplace. It's just, it's owning who we are and our actions and what we've done. And always looking for ways to build other people's self-esteem. You don't have to always be the one that has the answers and be the amazing one. It's like, how do you share that success with your team? How do you allow the gifts and talents that you've hired these individuals to do to show up every day and be able to do that? And that truly starts with you and your ability to let them be able to do that. Because if you're not, then why are they there? And I talk to a lot of people that I'm working with that work for leaders that they're like, I'm not even sure why I'm here, because I don't feel like I can bring what I can to the table. It's not appreciated. And so, just thinking about, how can you do that better? How can you do that better? Because I'm sure all of us are doing some of these things and not intending to do and to not do them, but times get busy. It's more important than ever to slow down and think about, how are we showing up? So the last one, all of these are important, are critically important, especially when leading through challenging times, but really we should be doing these things all the time. And if we are, and challenging times or crisis happens, it's okay. because this is just us, maybe showing up and doing this a little bit more because of what we're going through. But the last piece of this is being empathetic. And I don't know how you be a leader. Well, there are leaders that are not empathetic, but to be a great leader, to be a good leader, to be a successful leader is to be an empathetic one. And this goes back to the listening. And I know I keep saying the word listening throughout this whole thing, but if you look at these 4 things that we're talking about, all of them involve listening to your people. So some tips for being empathetic, because this can be a challenging one, especially when we are frustrated with someone or we're hearing things that we don't agree with. But it's important to go inward for a moment when we are feeling like that and reflect on, why am I having these thoughts? And, how are they getting in the way of me being to truly understand what this person is saying? And I need to know that to be able to make good decisions. I need to know where somebody is coming from, and in asking what they need from you. It is absolutely okay to do that. And you'll notice on some of the questions that I have shared with you as a takeaway from this afternoon, just asking your team, what needs do you have that are not being met right now? And how can I better serve you? How can I better do that for you? Again, we make a lot of assumptions about things and think that we know, especially if people have been working for us for a long time. These questions that I'm sharing with you are not questions just asked new people who have joined your company. These are questions to check in if you haven't already done so on a regular basis, and just make sure that how you're showing up and performing for them is exactly what they need. And then, where can you connect? What is it that you agree on? Because to be empathetic doesn't mean that I completely understand, I've lived your life, I know what it is. It just means that I'm slowing down enough to listen to understand how you might feel about this, because you're going through something that I've never had to go through. So, I don't know. I have my own things I'm going through, and I can share that with you, but I need to know what it is right now that you're going through. And again, how can I support you in that and be the leader that you need? So just some things that you can say when you are sitting down and listening to someone and trying to, respect their words, hear what they're saying is, so I'm understanding you correctly, you are saying. It's important to paraphrase back. What I'm hearing, you seem, you feel, really sharing and trying to understand. And what I'm going to tell you about listening is you cannot really listen to people and multitask. I know we think we can, but when people come into your office and you are either on your computer or you're doing something else, and you're someone on your team says, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And you're like, "Absolutely." And you just continue typing and you're like, "Go ahead, share with me. It does not communicate that we are really trying to empathetically listen to what that person has to say. One of the best leaders that I worked for, whenever you came in to his office, he would close down the laptop, shut the door, sit his chair next to you, and for the next 5 to 10 minutes, you were the most important person in the room. And I have never, ever forgotten that, because out of all the people that I've worked for, and 30 years, no one has ever done that as well as he did, because you felt heard, you felt respected. And even if you came out of there and you ended up having more work to do, or he maybe disagreed with you on something, you still felt that you had your time to be able to share. And if he couldn't do that, he would tell you, and he would say, "Okay, is a crisis? Is something happening? Do I need, is it an emergency?" And most of the time, no, it wasn't. And he would say, "Okay, can you give me 5 minutes and let me finish this up? And then I will come find you and we'll go sit down. We'll have a cup of coffee and we'll talk about this. And I want to hear everything that you have to say." So you always knew when you came in, if he made the time for you in that moment, he had it. And if he didn't, he would tell you when he did, and then you would come back. And I have never forgotten that. And I share that tip with leaders all the time. And as I said in the beginning, this common sense seems common practice. But, think about it. The entire time I was growing up, I think about when I would have something to tell my parents, and they would be like, "Walk with me," and they would be doing something. And they're great parents. And, it's what we do. We think we can do things. But if you really want to listen to your people and you really want them to feel like they're being heard, give them the gift of stopping, slowing down, making eye contact, and just listening. And I promise you, if you haven't been doing a lot of that and you start doing it for a minute, it might freak people out, because we're so used to people doing other things. And, the laptops are not so bad much today as the phones. The phones are, as much as we love them, I see this just be a very disrespectful thing that we've started doing, especially in meetings when someone is talking or facilitating or presenting and we're on the phone. The greatest gift, the greatest respect you can have is just stopping to listen. And to be able to do that empathetically, I have to be able to hear you and I have to be able to focus on your words. So I love this quote that I came across, that leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. And I think to be a leader is a great, great privilege. I really do. And for those people that don't embrace that, then maybe it's not a job that you should have, because I believe that if there's people that are in your charge, people that you are responsible for, for being an entrepreneur, for being the president of the company, their livelihood, you're responsible for that, but you're also responsible for providing resources to them, helping take care, helping develop, helping grow them, because they're showing up for you every day. So how are you nurturing that? How are you taking care of that? And there have been, so many different ways and opportunities to do that through this pandemic. And I hope what we do is not lose this momentum that we've been building of learning how to do new things and being open to that. And, one of my other tips for you would be, and we're not out of this yet, it's not gone, but, as we're phasing into different reopenings of things, have you sat down with your team and had a conversation on a post middle of the pandemic conversation about what worked well when we were going through this? What are some things that if you had teams working remotely, we realized we don't need to be doing anymore? It was something that was not necessary. What did you realize with how you were having to work that, my gosh, we weren't doing this, now we need to be doing this? This goes to that collaborative conversation. It shouldn't be you as the leader of the company sitting back and trying to figure out, how did this go? How did we do? You should be checking in with everybody that works with you, that works around you to, let's talk about, what did we learn from this? And how are we going to become better for it? It's in such a time of a lot of sadness around the world and around the country for things, as I've said, let's pull forward and let's try to bring the best out of it, the best for ourselves, the best for our organizations, because we can be better and we know we can. It takes that time set aside to sit down and reflect on it and be proactive so that we don't have to be reactive. So I am going to challenge you after you go away from this, is to take a look at that handout that I've given you, because I list the four behaviors that I talked about: the collaborative communicator, respectful responder, accountable attitude, and the empathetic ear. Which one of those are your solid gifts? Which one of those do you know that you do really, really well? And you can, pat yourself on the back and say, I get feedback on that all the time. My team says that I do that. And then maybe which is one of the ones that, it's your area of focus. You realize that sometimes you can get distracted listening, and you're going to try to be better about making space for doing that. But I'm going to ask you to commit to one that you want to grow, that you want to do better. And then I want you to look at the one that you feel like you really, really do well. And how are you teaching that? How are you modeling that for people so that they know that is one of your strengths? So I hope that you find this helpful, as a resource for you. Another resource that I have available is I send out, and the July edition just came out today, a monthly e-newsletter called Hope for Leaders. And it's just practical tips that I've shared with you today on a number of different things about how you can lead your team more effectively, more successfully. So if that is something that you are interested in, I encourage you to just shoot me an email, because I don't just sign people up. It's a permission thing. So if you would like to receive that, I would be more than happy to share that as another resource for you. And I want to point out on the picture, this is something that I am very proud of. I turned 10 years old as a leadership development organization, Hope did, this past May. So in celebration of that is my 6-year-old niece, Hazel, who is maybe someday going to take over my company. She might be my succession plan. But we did a video that we put out on social media, and I asked her, what does it mean to her to be a leader? And this is coming again from a 6-year-old. And it was not staged. This was just a question. And she said, helping grownups learn things they do not know. And that just makes my heart, helping grownups learn things they do not know. And I thought, as a leader, we help teach people things they may not know. And how do we learn from them? And how do we have them teach us things we do not know? And that's a revolved process. So I want to thank you for showing up today. There's many places that you could have been during this lunch hour. So for those of you that showed up with us, I hope these tips were helpful. If I can ever be a resource for you, you have hope. Once you've met me, I'm in your network. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me an email if you're interested in the newsletter. We do have a book out on Amazon, Hope for Leaders, that I'm hoping to get a second edition of. In 2021, it was 2020, but as we said, life changes. So we're looking at doing that too. But I'm truly passionate about all of this. And as I said, if each one of us just try to do these things a little bit better for the people around us, think about how much better the world becomes. So thank you for your time. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Tony for any questions you have.
That was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dave.
We do have a few questions. And so one that comes from, comes from Rodney, which I see a lot of, and I think it's very important. Hopefully you can touch on this, but I can see where after we went through everything that it's easy for a leader to take a great employee and very easily turn them into a horrible employee just by some of the things that you kind of pointed out, by being disrespectful and being collaborative in a kind of a way that's not very good. And they may be a leader may do this unconsciously. So are there some tips that leaders can use to kind of identify an employee that was a great employee and then for some reason they didn't, and then how do you bring them back where they're a productive member of your team again?
Well, so if you've noticed a change in behavior, I'm going to start from that premise. Is if it's something that you've observed in someone that used to be a star employee that now has maybe their performance isn't as strong. Is that how we're checking in? I mean, having a conversation. You should be having regular one-on-ones with everyone that reports to you. And I don't, I can't set a time for you. I would say a minimum of once a month. Some leaders I work with do every other week, especially now, if you've got teams working remotely, you should be checking in. And as I said, the one-on-ones are not report status time. They're not for the leader to sit there and say, here's all the things, you need better. It's for that individual. It's checking in and saying, so tell me how things are going. What is your biggest pain right now you're having? What do you feel like is going really well? And, if you've noticed this person's performance declining, think to yourself, when was the last time I checked in? Really checked in, not just walked past them and said, how's it going? What's going on? Just sitting down and saying, I'm here to support you. Is there anything that I can be doing for you differently? Some of the questions I shared might be really some great ones to probe and ask about. But the only real way that you're going to get to that is by having a conversation and just asking. And maybe it's been a while since you have had that with that person. And if not, then maybe you need to be asking some different questions to go a little deeper, because there's obviously something going on. And maybe as a leader, I've done something like David, we talked about that. I don't even realize I did, because a leader that I had he kept checking in on me, and I thought he didn't trust me. And he just wanted to be there for me. So, his intentions and his actions were different. And guess what I was judging? Only his actions. Because he didn't say, Hope, I know you're doing a great job. I just want to be here to support you. It was always this, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I just felt like it was micromanaging. So, as I said, our actions and our words don't always align. So we have to look at it from sitting down and maybe talking with that person.
Tony, you got a question?
Yes, Dave, I do. But before I ask a question, I wanted Hope to know that April Spalding, she says hi. And she says, I spent many months with you at the Louisville Slugger, and she says she greatly valued your classes.
Oh, well, thank you, April. Thank you very much. Oh, it's great to have you virtually with me.
And also I wanted you to know that Kelly, I think it's Helgeson, She said, nice presentation,
Oh,
Hope.
thank you.
So
Yeah, it's not, that's sweet. I advertise just, I'm like, if anybody wants to join me for lunch tomorrow to talk about caring. So thank you for sharing that with me.
no problem. So Kimberly Branham, she says, how can a sole proprietor maintain focus and motivation when most of their revenue is generated via social and public interactions and events? In other words, how do I lead myself?
How do you lead yourself? I say when you're leading yourself, like, are there people in your network or people that you work with that can be really good people that can offer you some feedback, that can give, just checking in with people. How am I showing up for you? How am I serving you? And if you're sole proprietor, I do 360s with leaders all the time, but when you're sole proprietor, that's a little bit different. But, I just would always look at who are some people that I know are going to give me some really good constructive feedback, not critical, but constructive, and just checking in with them. I do that with leaders all the time that I'm working with. It's because I'm a sole proprietor as well. So I'm going out and serving leaders, and I'm constantly saying, did this serve you? Was this helpful? What could I have provided that maybe I didn't? Don't be afraid to ask for the feedback. But, I find sometimes we are afraid to ask for the feedback because we'll get it. And then what if somebody tells us, something that, but the only way we're going to get better is by asking those questions. So as a sole proprietor, when was the last time you checked in with maybe some people that will be really good about giving you a whole well-rounded piece and giving you some ideas for how to grow? Because as I said, how I grow my business and the things that I offer leaders are based on what leaders tell me they need. I customize everything that I do. I mean, when Dave and I had this conversation and, we were brainstorming, like, what could I talk about? I came up with that CARE acronym myself, just based on all the leaders I'm working with right now, the last 3 months especially. What do I see they've needed to do more so than ever before? Always need to be doing it, but even more was important today to be able to do that in a time of crisis. So yeah, just check in, find some people that you can get some good constructive feedback from.
Well, you've got some great feedback here from Norma May. She said, I needed to hear this during this difficult time. I've been a manager for 30 years, and it's always good to be reminded of the important things we need to do. Excellent presentation. We all need to be reminded occasionally. And then she's yelling in caps, thank you, thank you.
That's what I said. I mean, seriously, I've told my mom, like, what do I teach? It's common sense that's not common practice. And now she tells people that. But I mean, it's like one of those things as a leader. It's like, you can't just show up at the gym on January 1st and work out and not work out the other 364 days. It's like, as a leader, I can't show up I've got to show up every day and think about, did I do this well today? Nope. I got to work at it better tomorrow. So yeah, the constant reminders for me, it's either validating that I'm doing it or a reminder I need to be doing it. So thank you.
So Hope, I have a question for you. So what about if, how you were talking about how leaders can be disrespectful, and they may have a valuable employee that they may have intentionally or unintentionally disrespected, and now they need that person to come on board and help them. Do you have any tips of how you can get that, what they can do to try to get that person back on board?
It goes back to the first question that we had just a moment ago that Dave shared. It's sitting down and being able to have that conversation. And maybe you need, depending on how deep it goes with the employee, is it past the point where they can come back from it? And I've seen that too, where it's those ones I talk about, quit and stay. And I have conversations with those employees, and I'm like, if you don't have it to give anymore, you might need to change the things around you, because it's not fair to anybody if you're done giving. So it's really assessing, is this person done giving, or do they have more to give if I'm able to modify some of my behaviors that I was unaware of? And again, I say it depends on how that relationship is. I've actually moderated some of those conversations for a leader and the employee. Check in with HR if you have an HR, or is there somebody that could just, if it's a situation where this employee has stopped really communicating with you and they don't want to sit down and have this conversation with you, I always say that's the first place to start, though, is you sitting down, letting the person know that you want to have a conversation of how can you both work together better? How can you make this relationship better? And then if that's not possible with just the two of you, who is a resource maybe internally that can help moderate that so that you're both heard?
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question for you though. So you talked about some ways that you can collaborate with people. I love the empathetic leadership, by the way. I'm hoping that's my strength. I'm not quite sure though. Dave would be able to tell me if it was or not. But anyway, so so what tips do you have? Like, because you said like you're not going to be strong in all areas, but maybe you want to do better and being more collaborative. Do you have like maybe some resources that you could tap into, or maybe some tips for somebody that's trying to do better in the other areas?
I would say, first of all, if there's a way that you can ask for some feedback, is there, and I don't know what internal resources people might have, but, I encourage leaders to do some kind of whatever form of 360 that you can do in a year to get feedback on some of these leadership traits. Don't just shoot in the dark with it. And, Tony's great point, because I might think I'm doing it really well and I'm not, or I might not think I'm doing it well at all. And that's what my team thinks is my strength. So I don't want to start deconstructing the wrong things and then figure out like, oh, okay, this is so wrong. So, how are you as a leader soliciting feedback? And again, that can be in form of anonymous, type of 360 format, but you should, from the starting point, use some type of assessment to figure out how you're showing up. And then from that, developing some kind of plan going forward of, okay, people say I don't listen in meetings, that I interrupt, or, whatever it is. And then from there, kind of determining how am I going to start running these meetings differently? Maybe I have a rotating facilitator on the team. It's not just my meeting, it's the team's meeting. So maybe I have each person on my team, whatever your one thing is. But I definitely, before I would jump in and assume that I do or don't do any of these things well, how are you going to solicit some of this feedback to know and to confirm that, and then figure out which one you're going to work on going forward?
Thank you. That's some good advice. We have a question here from Emily. She says, I am young and see myself as low on the totem pole. So sometimes when I give feedback to clients, it unintentionally comes off as out of my place. Any advice for how I can make sure I am doing this in a constructive way?
How I would start, if you, Emily, that's, and that is, for those of us that are in a room that maybe we're the younger person, it's like, is it being disrespectful if I'm sharing something? And I think it goes back to that intent part. So if I know my intent is to help this be better, is really just sharing, prefacing before you say something, I have some thoughts on this that I would like to share if you're willing to hear this. So, I just, as I'm sitting here listening, I've got some questions I'd like to ask, and I've got some things that I would like to put forward for us to think about. I think in those scenarios, it's important how you frame it, instead of where I've watched people just go, well, why are you doing it that way? And it comes off more, not that Emily's doing it this way, but it comes off more, you're telling me this way is bad and this is the way I've been doing it for a really long time. And I see that, with sometimes different generations or people that have been senior at the company for a while. Here comes this young person in telling us we're doing it wrong. So just how are we setting it up? Not that we're doing it. It's just saying, this has all been really interesting. I have some thoughts that I would like to share if the group, is willing. And most of the time I find no group is going to be like, no, I don't want to hear it. And if they do, well, then that's a whole other set of issues. But, it's genuinely putting it on the table of, the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to make this better. And I think when most people understand that your intent is to help, not hurt, they are willing to listen to what you have to say.
Okay. Thank you for that. Dave, do you have any questions for Hope?
I do. So back to the, back to the respectful part of what we were talking about. So if you were a middle manager, you could experience some of the disrespectful behavior from the superior. What are some tips to manage up, for example, like if your superior tends to complain about you to everyone around you, but they don't speak directly to you, or if you have a team below you, your supervisor speaks to your team members, but doesn't really include you in the conversation with the hope of them trying to be more collaborative or how do you instinctively manage that relationship?
Well, and I've had people that I've coached that their bosses have done those things to them, and I have encouraged a conversation. And it's sitting down and saying, explaining how you feel, and keeping it behavior focused. So these are some of the behaviors. So not making it personal and you do this, you do that, you do. It's when these things happen, or these are some behaviors that are occurring that are making it challenging for me to be able to be successful in my role, or it's making it challenging for me to be able to communicate, or whatever it is. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that up for whatever reason, if you have a resource internally that can help be part of that dialogue for you, that's always, I say that's secondary. The best is if you can sit down and talk to that person. And, is there anybody that you can sit down and have like a role play with that, like what you're going to say? I always encourage in those crucial conversations to map that outline out. Don't go in there cold with just because I've done that. And oh my goodness, I got hijacked. My emotions took over. And it was like, I was, wah! Then my boss was like, oh God, you're crying, get out of here. I was like, oh, that didn't go well. So, those times though that I made myself some notes, and I end with, what do I need this person to do differently? What do I need this person to do differently? And I need to be able to answer that, because a lot of times we'll get frustrated and the person may say, okay, so what do you need? And in my situation, I was like, I don't know. I hadn't thought through it. So really thinking through what behaviors are happening. How does that make you feel when those behaviors occur? What is it that you need that person to do differently? And if you can have that one-on-one conversation with your boss by yourself, that's great. If you can't, don't be afraid to seek a resource. Seek somebody that can maybe help you, even if it's, you feel comfortable going in, but you want somebody to look over what you're going to say. Don't be afraid to reach out and do that. But it's like anything else, things that we're prepared for, we do well. The things that we're not, we don't. So don't go in there emotional and frustrated about it. Give it a little bit thought about what would success look like coming out of that conversation. What would make things better for you? And then go forward with that.
Thank you for that. I think that's all the questions we have, and we're kind of right at the top of the hour. So, Hope, I really want to thank you for coming today and sharing with us everything that you shared today. I mean, it's been very insightful. I've really got a lot out of it, and I do thank you yet again. I'm sure everybody else I encourage to reach out to Hope and keep learning and keep growing. And Tony, you got anything you want to add?
Yes, I do. I wanted to let Hope know that Emily said thank you. That advice you gave her was helpful.
Oh, wonderful. And Emily, don't be afraid to put it out there and share. We need every voice heard, from young to what I like to say as I get older, the more mature. You go from being young to mature, so just know that it's coming for everybody if you're lucky enough. But I don't use the word old. Mature. We hope as we get older, we become more mature.
Yeah.
So
thank you again, Hope, and thank you, Tony and Janet. And we'll be back here next week at noon. We'll be going over the new rules for the Paycheck Protection Program yet again, and always a good subject. So hopefully you'll be able to join us again. This is something that's be an ongoing conversation that we need to have. We always need to be better leaders. And so thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.